Just give it 30 more seconds or so to get some folks to join. All right, if you're just jumping on the call, I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds for people to join the webinar. I'm just watching the participants go up here. Okay, I think we probably have enough to get started with our opening remarks. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the NJDV HIMSS Virtual Fall Conference. My name is Sarah Eberly, and I'm the secretary of the Delaware Valley HIMSS chapter, and I'm also a senior product manager at Comcast. It is my pleasure to introduce our Security and Protection Now panel discussion. But before we get started with that, I just have a couple of quick housekeeping announcements. First, just as always, want to offer a big thank you to our New Jersey and our Delaware Valley chapter sponsors. Without you, we can't underscore enough that we wouldn't be able to offer this virtual education content, especially for our fall conference. So always grateful to have your guys' support. Second, as a reminder, during the webinar for all panelists and attendees, you can type questions by clicking the Q&A button. That's at the bottom of your screen. If time allows, at the end, we'll be addressing all of the questions at the end of the presentation. So make sure you leverage that if you think of things as we're going through each of the panelist discussions. And third, if you can please stay on for the duration of the presentation. At the end, we'll be announcing the winner of our $200 gift card, and you do have to be present to win. So stay tuned for that to see if you win the big prize. Okay, now I'd like to turn it over to Terry McGurk with ServiceNow to introduce today's expert panel. Terry.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Just want to say thank you to both chapters for allowing ServiceNow to be part of today's session. It's an honor to be part of the HIMSS organization. Before I introduce Rich Temple as our moderator and our distinguished panel, just want to take a minute just to explain why ServiceNow is part of a security panel, if you will. People think of ServiceNow as a ticketing system, if you will, for the enterprise. What we found recently is with ever-changing 6-7 months of the world changing, is folks are being tasked with changing the way people are working and coming back to work, and really the effectiveness of the risks involved with those people and the security of organizations. So ServiceNow integrated risk management solution sort of connects all of those different departments from a workflow perspective, whether it's IT, HR, or legal, and enables them to come up with a comprehensive integrated risk management plan to mitigate that risk over the long term. So keep that in mind as you think of the workflow engine of ServiceNow and the power it does for organizations. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Rich Temple. Rich is going to be our moderator today. He is currently the Vice President and Chief Information Officer of DeBoer Heart and Lung. And I'm just going to take a minute to just read a little bit about Rich's background and bio, and then hand it off to him. Rich has been in the healthcare space for over 30 years now. He's currently, as I mentioned, the Vice President and CIO of DeBoer Heart and Lung, which is an 85-bed nationally renowned cardiovascular specialty hospital in Browns Mill, New Jersey. Rich also serves on DeBoer's HIPAA security officer. Prior to the role at DeBoer, Rich spent a number of years in the consulting space, including stints as the founder of Richard Temple and Associates, a consultancy specializing in healthcare advisory and strategy, as well as serving as a national practice director for IT strategy for Beacon Partners, which is now a KPMG company. Additionally, Rich has also worked as vice president and CIO of both St. Clair Health Systems in Denville, New Jersey, and for Aristocare Health Services, which runs several long-term care facilities in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Earlier in his career, Rich worked for McKesson Provider Technologies and Healthcare Management Systems on revenue cycle optimization projects. Rich also served as president, secretary, and board member of the statewide chapter of HIMSS in New Jersey. Quite an extensive background. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Rich.
And thank you very much, Terry. And for the next hour, we're gonna do the dating game. Probably all you needed to hear for that. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us remotely as we do the brave new world of remote conferences. I'd love to see you all live, but look at how we make it work in the absence of being able to do that. So for the next hour and change, let me tell you how this dating game is going to work. So what's going to happen, I'm going to introduce the panelists first. And we'll give them a couple of minutes each to sort of talk about their backgrounds and their organizations. And then we're going to introduce the bachelors, also known as the vendors. And you guys too, please, a couple of minutes each, just don't be overly salesy in your introduction. And if you would, please, talk about yourselves as much as your companies, because what'll happen as we flesh out our different rounds down the road is that we will give you lots of time to talk about what your product offerings are. So after the intros, we're going to have 3 rounds of about 15 minutes each. We're going to have 2 rotating panelists asking questions in each round. And I am going to be the time police. So I will be watching. I should say I'm not going to cut microphones, but I know there's a lot of talk about that these days. But Scout's honor, I'll try to keep everything moving. So we have time constraints. And after we have those 3 rounds of 15 minutes each, where the panelists ask questions of the bachelors and try to learn about their offerings, there'll be a 5-minute or so huddle where the panelists will decide amongst themselves who they would like to quote unquote date. And during that time, I will also field questions from the chat box from you guys while the panelists confer. So with that said, let me introduce you to the team. So the first, our first panelist is Tara Matthews, and our second panelist is Bob Babin, and our third panelist is Hussein Syed. And I'd like to turn it over to you, Tara, just to give a little couple of minute bio on you and your organization, and then we'll go to Bob and Hussein, and then we will go to our bachelors. So take it away, Tara.
All right, thank you, Rich. I'm so excited to be here. I am Tara Matthews. I'm a Taurus. I love dogs. Oh wait, you wanted to hear what my background was. Sorry. Dating game jokes aside, I'm Chief Information Security Officer at Einstein Healthcare Network. So we have multiple facilities. Our academic medical center in North Philadelphia. We have our Montgomery provider organization out in East Norriton. And then Elkins Park, our medical and surgical specialty, and then Moss Rehab locations throughout Philadelphia and Montgomery counties. We have multiple outpatient centers and primary care locations. Over 500 physicians, we have over 400 residents and fellows, and about 10,000 employees. So a large organization, and challenging to keep everyone secure, especially as we're working remote these days. So I will turn it over to the next panelist.
Hi, I'm Robert Babin. I'm the CISO for St. Peter's Healthcare Center, or system in New Brunswick, New Jersey. We're probably anywhere between a middle to a large size system, multiple locations, as much diversity as you could probably imagine. I have 40 years experiences ranging from manufacturing, financial, and healthcare. I've held positions as senior vice president, and C-level responsibilities for various organizations. I currently oversee the information security and cyber security endeavors at the hospital. I'm well versed in business, technology, and in operations. I hold several master's degrees. I have several certifications, and that's the watered down version.
Thank you, sir. And I'd like to talk to panelist number 3, who's Hussein.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Hussein. I'm the CISO at RWJ Barnabas Health, or better spelled Robert Wood Johnson, Barnabas Health System out of New Jersey. We comprise of about 13 hospitals, relationship with medical schools, Cancer Institute. Take a lot of pride in offering healthcare to the residents of New Jersey and some of the snowbirds that come back from Florida and wherever else. As for my background, I've been in IT pretty much all my life. Worked in consulting in the early days, then a stint with a startup, and over to RW Barnabas Health, which is now RWJ Barnabas. So my responsibilities are the typical CISO's responsibilities: IT risk management, cybersecurity, day-to-day IT operations, incident response, threat intel, and list goes on. Thank you.
Thank you. And what an august group of panelists we have, huh, bachelors? And now it's our time to introduce the bachelors. And we have bachelor number 1 coming to you from Connection. We have Steve Nardone. Steve, can you say a couple of words about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And it's really a pleasure to be here today. Just start off, Connection is a national solutions provider, and I run the cybersecurity solutions practice. So my job is to help customers understand, determine, document, prioritize, and manage their risks. So certainly technology is a key piece of that, but also services like testing and so on is a key piece of that as well. Been in the industry for a long time. 1980, went to work for the National Security Agency, spent 15 years there. Have been a CSO. I was the CSO and CTO of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for a few years. I've been risk owners in other corporations, as well as this is the 4th time in my career I've run what we would call a consulting and professional services organization. I'm an Aquarius. I prefer walking in the forest rather than the beach, but that's okay. Walking is good. My favorite instrument is sitting in the background there. I'm a drummer, and when I'm not doing this, that's what I'm doing, making noise in my basement. Thank you, Rich.
The dawning of the age of Aquarius, right?
That's
right.
right.
Now we turn to bachelor number 2 from Enterprise Health. We present to you Vikas Khosla.
Hey,
Vikas,
everyone.
take it away.
Thanks, Rich. Hi, everyone. So my name is Vikas Khosla. I'm the Chief Digital Health Officer at Enterprise Health, as we like to say. We're here to make security sexy. So my goal is to hopefully engage with everyone today and share some really great thoughts and ideas about the industry, as well as answer some of these, what will be, I'm sure, very poignant questions. I too love dogs. I am a certified fact checker. And no, I'm joking. I'm not certified. There's no such thing. I don't think. In all transparency, I know Hussein and Bob and Rich, and we've collaborated and worked together in the past. I'm a very proud member, previous member of the New Jersey HIMSS board, a current member of the Security, Privacy, and Compliance Committee. And hopefully in the course of our discussion, I'll tell you more about what Enterprise does and how it weaves into the topics we'll discuss today.
Thank you, Vikas. And now, last but definitely not least, we go to bachelor number 3. Coming to you from Mimecast, we have Matthew Gardner. Matthew, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. Matthew Gardner, Principal Security Strategist at Mimecast. I've been in the security industry for more than 20 years, identity management, network monitoring, and now with Mimecast, I focus on really security aspects of people. So the different ways cyber criminals go after your people, social engineering, I'm sure we're going to talk about later, but protecting them via email, via phishing, via web, helping them understand and be more aware via training, etc. And I am a Scorpio, and I'm 6'2".
Thank you, Matthew. So now that we've gotten to know our panelists and our bachelors a little bit, it's time for the questioning. And what we're going to do, like I said, we're going to have 3 rounds of 15 minutes each. Each round is going to be comprised of 2 of the panelists asking questions. So again, please be mindful of time so we can make sure everybody gets to be heard. We're going to start with round 1, and we're going to start with Tara Matthews. So Tara, you have a question you'd like to ask bachelor number 3 or Mimecast, correct?
Yes. So for bachelor number 3, Matthew, I'm only 5'2", Matthew, by the way.
That's not a problem.
There's many considerations when protecting remote workers. Explain how your company or product factors in those protections, and what would you consider the gold standard for remote security?
Well, I'd say one thing we've quickly learned with everyone rushing home is that if you were digitally transformed in your security practices, it was a non-event from an IT or security point of view. And if you weren't, it was a little bit more of an event. You see statistics like the mass rollout of laptops. So clearly, a lot of organizations weren't, ready from a hardware point of view. You saw challenges for organizations that, their VPN capacity was maxed out because they only sized it for, say, 20% of their company or whatever. Those are all signs that, you weren't as digitally transformed as maybe you would have liked to have been. And so I consider the quick high-level gold standard is cloudification as much as possible as your security controls. Not all security controls can be, sourced from the cloud, but an awful lot can be. And obviously, once you do that, you are location independent. And then also you have to think about the people, your people who in many cases were, on premises most of the time, and on your network and under your scrutiny, probably more so than they certainly are now. You have to help your people understand that, they're part of your security program. They're part of your last line of defense, really. If all else fails, you want your people to be aware and understand and not engage, where they shouldn't, not share where they shouldn't. And so, you have to take your security program out to their home, which can mean advice on security controls on their network, et cetera. Obviously, the device, but also their awareness, understanding of the situation they're in now. Attackers have pivoted to the work from home and COVID. Workers should be trained and made more aware as best as possible that the risk environment has changed and they're part of the solution, not ideally not part of the problem.
Yeah, thank you. Great answers and great insights.
I think our Richard is on mute.
Rich, you need to unmute, please.
Rookie error for a CIO. All right, Bob, I turn it over to you. You have a question for bachelor number 1 from Connection, don't you?
Yes, I do. Steve, it's always been my vision over the past years for any organization that I've had the pleasure to work for. And this vision has components in it, and I need to see how your organization can help me achieve that vision where I am today. And that vision is to be better at what we do, faster and more nimble to market, lower my operating costs, and enhancing enterprise security services. How can you help me get there without compromising patient safety?
What a great question. Thank you very much. So there are a lot of moving components in that, right? And I'll start off by saying, from a security perspective, one of the things that you need to make sure you're taking into consideration is business operation. And that's a mistake that a lot of organizations make. They think that they just want to go for some type of a security standard. So the first thing we would do, and part of our strong skill set in our consulting and professional services organization, is to assess your overall business process, business operations, and take into consideration what your security considerations need to be. Because we all know risk is an interesting character, right? So risk management involves good risk decisions. It involves risk management, risk mitigation, and risk acceptance, right? So being able to help you understand what those challenges might be from an overall perspective. And then taking a look at what your strategies need to be for enhancement and operation. You know, as Matthew mentioned, you know, cloud services are certainly a way to be able to enhance capability. Things like SD-WAN improve overall application performance. So that's something that we'd want to take into consideration as well. And help you put together an entire strategy to include, if you are going to migrate to the cloud, putting a migration plan together that essentially involves the assessment of your current on-premise standards and requirements, as well as what you would need to move to the cloud. But moving back to security, right? I'm a cybersecurity guy. I've been in the industry for 40 years. You know, that's really a critical component, is to make sure that you are not compromising security for performance when you have the ability to be able to do that. So all of those things would be part of the overall architecture and strategy. And of course, Connection brings all the appropriate technologies to the table. And you know, I just want to make a point about, I think it was Tara that asked the question about gold standard. You know, we say this all the time. There is no silver bullet in the security world. You really need to be assessing your overall requirements, thinking about what you need to do, and then selecting the right technologies, many times technology that works together as an integrated solution that will allow you to get complete security visibility across your entire enterprise, east, west, north to south.
Can I pick up on the business operations? This is a quick comment. I agree fully. It is a pet peeve of mine that, you know, people think about the people and the tech side of security more or less, but they forget that, you know, attackers and or people, single point of failure should not happen in any important business process. So you see attacks that are, you know, wire transfer fraud, you know, initiating a wire transfer to a vendor in a fraudulent way, or direct deposit fraud. You know, how is it possible that a direct deposit or a wire transfer of any size could be initiated with an email, you know, with no mitigating control and no system that's really built for that? Happens all the time, but it really shouldn't.
Agreed.
Well, I want to thank both of you, unless somebody else wants to chime in. These are really good discussions, good answers. I like them.
Bachelor number 2,
Yeah,
Brian, if you want to type in.
Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, I just.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead, Vic, 'cause I'm sure.
Yeah. Is it me or is it Steve? Rich?
Okay, well, you go, Vikas, and then we'll have Steve come in.
Okay. Yeah, Bob, I think, you know, noting the points, the sort of your business plan, business case for the security program, you know, one of the things I wonder is, have you adopted a framework? You know, I assume you have, but I think really we take a top-down approach, starting with the framework. You know, we sort of have this motto of pick a framework, any framework, you know, whether you're a niche shop, you're a high trust shop, ISO, you know, CIS, DIY, whatever it might be, because really, I think we need to start, you know, you want a very sort of comprehensive solution and way to move your program forward. So frameworks are a great way to establish a baseline against which you do put into registers all of the different risks that exist out there, not only security and IT risk, but business risk, financial, others as well, bringing all of those things together. And then ultimately, if you can really utilize a platform that also provides collaboration, workflow, and integration of different security tools, that's a great way to scale that. You know, your point about lowering costs of operations. I mean, that is scalability. And then, of course, there's always the resource consideration, right? Both knowledge, expertise, and number of. And so again, you know, we think of this sort of as services and a software sort of combination, whether you're doing it with us or doing it with somebody else, starting with a framework as a foundation, and then really using that to evolve and then ultimately mature your program to the level that you want to get it at.
Thank you, Vikas.
Thank you, Vikas. Steve, you were going to say you were going to have a follow-up, right?
Yeah, just a couple other points. So, and the point about a framework is a great point. You know, not only does it allow you to be able to go in and create a baseline, but allows you to be able to measure success, which is really, you know, one of the key challenges that you have. I'm at a certain level today. Something like the NIST cybersecurity framework is an example. Where do I want to be in various controls and policies? How do I get there? And then you can measure your success, which is extremely critical. So that certainly is a very important component of making a decision on what your InfoSec program will be based upon. The other point I wanted to make when we were talking about the remote workforce is the fact that, and I know Matthew mentioned this, the corporate network now extends into the home, right? And so the risks associated with that are just absolutely tremendous. Who installed the cable modem? Who installed the wireless access point? Is it still set at user ID admin password? What controls are you using? Do you have encryption enabled? And then all the other users that are on that network who are not corporate employees, right? They're your family. So taking into account that, you really need to be very careful, and security awareness is, as Matthew mentioned, as well as a key component of that. We all know the worker, the employee, is the weakest link in the security chain. We like to refer to that as the human firewall. If you think about, you know, tightening controls on the human firewall and ensuring they're doing employees are making the right decisions is really critical. And then I also mentioned, you know, some level of dark net analysis, looking at indicators of compromise out there on the big bad internet is something that one should consider as well, especially for remote workforce, because now you can see if employees who you can't see anymore, if their systems may have been compromised in some way, shape, or form.
Rich, can I comment on that too? I wasn't quite sure of the format in the beginning.
Sure. Well, go right ahead.
Okay. And I'll keep it brief, Tara, but I think, you know, certainly we've heard a lot about zero trust networks relative to remote workforces and remote working in general, whether it's in the age of COVID or otherwise. Obviously, it's been around for a long time, the concepts, but I think this is certainly what we've seen is this has been an acceleration of moving towards a zero trust architecture for most enterprises. So when you talk about gold standards, I think of that, but the other trend that we've seen and a lot of area of interest that we've seen is education and training. I think to Steve's point, you know, Matt pointed it out as well. I think it's become clear that there aren't enough security controls that we can put in place. We really need to invest in education and awareness training of our workforce, because ultimately they are going to be the stewards of their little virtual cubicle of security and workplace. And so as strong as we can make that workforce, as much of them as we can make sort of, you know, on our team, strong, enabled, compliant with the behaviors and the policies and the procedures that I think security CISOs, you know, like yourselves put in place, the stronger we're going to be. So it's sort of a, you know, all in kind of an approach, all up, all in kind of an approach. But I think certainly zero trust and workforce security, workforce education are two themes we've seen a lot of.
Thank you very much, Bachelor number 2. And any final thoughts on this discussion from any of our bachelors before we move on to the next round? Okay, then, very good. We now proceed to round 2, and in round 2, we have Hussein, who will be posing the question to Bachelor number 3, who is Matthew from Mimecast.
So hi, Matthew. How do you do today? You're about 2
Very
inches
well,
taller
thank
than
you.
I am. Yeah, probably 10 years younger. Speaking of zero trust and information protection, I kind of perused the Mimecast website and was a little confused about understanding what your delivery model and where did you fit in to solve that problem is. But can you, in a few words, describe what Mimecast does? How does it protect information? How does it deliver a measurable, reportable solution for data protection?
Yeah, so the company was founded by 2 South Africans in 2003, actually, on the cloud, believe it or not. I mean, when I joined 5 years ago, who was doing cloud in 2003? These guys were And they focused on initially the transition, because if you go back to 2003 and a little bit before, email was transitioning from a kind of a fun thing to an enterprise thing. And they could see the problem of having been, in the world of email, in their past, the problem of the management around email, not just security, but obviously that was the early days of email-borne threats and viruses and whatnot. But also around continuity, keeping things up and running, archiving, forensics, data backup and recovery of email, but all as a cloud service. And that was really the insight that built the company. And with the acceleration of email-borne threats, phishing, impersonations, malware delivery, bad links, and all the stuff that you can get in email, the solution had to grow. And it also had to grow beyond just email. It had to grow into essentially a more user-facing, like all the ways that a user can be compromised or carelessly share information, or maybe even be malicious. So it grew into web defenses, so filtering web traffic in addition to email traffic. And then, we had been in the business of trying to make the user part of the solution as part of our email solution and web. But then we went all the way and said, it's more than just email and web. Your users need to be aware of what they're sharing on social media, and what not letting people into the building, and all those things that are part of a larger security program. So we came out with a security awareness training module, and all of these are part of a platform sourced from the cloud, integrated, because there's lots of back and forth of controls, data, policies, between these essentially security vectors. And we've just been building out, essentially tracking where attackers are going and where users are falling down, and trying to fill those gaps with a cloud-based service.
Thank you, Bachelor number 3. Any other follow-up thoughts from Bachelor number 1 or Bachelor number 2?
That's interesting.
So this is Steve. So overall, the thought process in and around layered security and making sure that you're paying attention to all the essentially potential attack vectors that those malicious actors can take advantage of is really critical. What Mimecast brings to the table, we work with Mimecast quite frequently, is a really solid solution. Thinking about the ability to be able to block phishing or deal with phishing, we know since COVID began, phishing has increased 600%. Everyone that's out there, all those bad guys are out there, are leveraging a horrible situation to their advantage by sending false COVID-19 documents that, to teach people how to respond and how to protect themselves. So, having the ability to be able to manage that, as well as web access, right, preventing drive-bys and things like that is super critical, especially with remote workers, again, as they're in that unprotected environment. So very, very important technology to make sure is being deployed.
And also, it's email security, as well as some other areas, are really on the vanguard of the cloud movement for security controls. I mean, how many people would deploy Exchange on premises today? Maybe you still have it, but you're probably going to go O365 or Google. Same idea with your security controls, as increasingly, secure web gateways, or DNS filters, or anti-phishing solutions, what Gartner calls the SASE, I forget what the acronym means actually, but basically pushing your controls up into the cloud, because most organizations, in the world of security, there's the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots way outweigh the haves. Most organizations just can't afford the people or traditional systems the way like big banks or maybe big healthcare networks can. So given everyone's moving IT, moving to IT-enabled businesses, there's this conundrum of how do you secure it, and you just can't hire your way out, and you can't deploy software and hardware to get your way out of it. So outsourcing to the cloud becomes a key part of the, how to wrestle down the challenge.
Thank you. Bachelor number 2, Vikas from Enterprise. Any thoughts on this before we go to the next question?
No, I mean, I agree with a lot of what Matthew's been saying. As I said, we've seen a real increase in interest in workforce security, endpoint security. So I think, new novel ways of getting more secure at the endpoint. I think we're talking a lot about that in these early conversations here. It's really about the remote worker or the worker work from home, and the devices that they use and securing those. Obviously, that's a big focus of of where we need to be going going forward.
Thank you. And now we can go to the second part of round 2, and I turn to our panelist, Tara Matthews from Einstein. And Tara, you'd like to ask a question about your number 2, Vikas from Enterprise Health. So I turn it over to you for that question.
Thanks, Rich. I wanted to pivot a little bit away from remote workers, but Vikas, you mentioned something about devices, and that's really what I'd like to ask about. Is the Internet of Things is mature enough now, right? It's on everyone's radar. A lot of things in healthcare we're looking at are medical devices. How do you integrate that IoT environment into a larger vulnerability management program? Identifying them, making sure they're secure. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. If we're talking specifically medical devices and things on that side, various other computing devices that would be IoT. There's small, there's large. Speaking to somebody yesterday that was talking about a whole sort of pharmaceutical process, really big engine that they're making, but it's all created with all different kinds of smaller IoT components, but med devices as well. So there are a lot of great solutions out there. That is a very unique, I would say, a very specific area of how do you secure them, how do you scan them properly. They're in the medical device space, as we all know, we have a broad range of devices with all different kinds of security, all different kinds of vulnerabilities. It's really, really difficult for CISOs and folks that are responsible for the clinical device inventory within a health system, let's say, to really secure them and get a handle upon them. In the last few years, we've seen a lot of software that has been sort of brought to the market to help to address that problem specifically, scan those things, understand where the vulnerabilities are, and then recommend patches, recommend remediation, things of that nature, and obviously identify risk. So that's really more where we come into play in terms of enterprise, specifically around our services, as well as our platform called Protect. And so that particular platform is an integrated risk management platform. So what we want to do, not only with IoT devices, but with security tools in general that are in a CISO's environment, is really bring all of that together. We have a long history in interoperability and APIs. So by bringing the information, whether it be from these devices that are really good at analyzing IoT devices and systems, all the way to things that are good at third-party risk management, to even assessments. It could be the assessment that you had an external assessor do that's delivered to you on a PDF. So wherever those risk sources are, things that are coming from the network infrastructure, your SIM, firewalls, other things. So really looking at it, we've got so many tools in the security realm right now. To us, what we're trying to tackle is how do you bring it all together elegantly? How do you normalize all of that information so that a high risk here is meaningful relative to a high risk here? Because we know that all of these risks are being assessed with different proprietary methodologies oftentimes, or qualitatively. So it's about normalizing all of that, using a standard sort of nomenclature and lexicon to normalize all of that, to really create this holistic view of vulnerability and risk at an enterprise level, really sort of in a real-time fashion. So that's what we're really trying to do through sort of our tech-enabled services platform while respecting that there are some really good products out there that we are not looking to compete with. We really want to complement and bring all of that together. So that's sort of from our company standpoint, how we would look to bring it all together. And I think we, with NIST RMF 2.0, as well as OSCAL by NIST, the lexicon by NIST, I think we do have an opportunity moment right now to bring this together and to actually do it. We've been trying to do risk registers for 15, 20 years now unsuccessfully because really the proprietary nature and the lack of sort of what we call interoperable risk. So, but now we do think we're in an opportunity moment where we can bring this all together with standards that are now being adopted at the federal level that we think will come down into industry, and then a software, a lexicon called OSCAL that can really map towards the RMF and bring and normalize all these risks together. So you have that holistic view, but also the ability to look into each of your security programs. So sorry for being a little long-winded there, but it's a very important topic which you just raised.
Yeah, and I like that you keep saying holistic view, because that's what we need to see. And it's a constant monitoring, right? There's all kinds of devices that are getting put onto your network at any given moment. So it's not something that you can just do once and done or once a quarter. It's constant.
Yeah, and I think there really is an analogy to health information exchange here, where it feels very similar to me that this holistic view is sort of this longitudinal view of risk across the enterprise, like we wanted a longitudinal patient record, right? So that, as well as standards and the ability to communicate with standards, I think we have that opportunity now to really create that holistic view. Sorry, Matthew.
Yeah, really good point. Matthew, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm very worried about this. This is my third basic computing architecture change that I'm going to experience. And when I specifically mean, I mean smart and quote dumb, smart, or whatever you want to say, devices that are going to be coming from manufacturers that don't know what Patch Tuesday is. They might have Patch Decade, at least in their tradition history, on a network. Don't forget 5G. A lot of people are going to skip the local network and go straight to 5G, particularly for like I'll think of a small doctor's office perhaps, or whatever. Maybe big hospitals will still have local, but so you're going to have devices you don't own or control. In many cases, they're going to like lease them to you probably if they're really expensive, from manufacturers that don't have much of a history of building secure software and deploying it to these devices on a network that you don't have visibility or control over. It seems like and there could be, outside of medical, there could be billions of these things out there. So I don't have the magic solution to this problem, but I can sort of see the major problem coming down the path.
Yeah, I would love a silver bullet, but I know it's not out there. Hi, Steve, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just a couple of other comments. So one of the things that's the scariest part about IoT is that the devices have been designed for ease of implementation, right? Not necessarily security. They want to have the ability for anybody to be able to take these devices. You can take a camera, you can install it. It doesn't take a lot of technical experience to be able to do that. So because of that, there is a higher level of risk associated with that. You really need to make sure you're choosing the right devices from reputable companies. And to Matthew's point, right, somebody that may have considered security in the development of their systems. Somebody that doesn't, is the point I made about wireless in the home, right? Have a configuration manual that has user ID as admin, password as password. So anybody that hasn't rotated that or changed that, you now know how to break into the device. I think everybody's familiar with the huge camera issue that Australia had about, I think it was about a year ago. So it is really, really critical. I think the figure I saw was something like 14.6 billion IoT devices will be deployed next year. So now what we have is a huge increase in attack surface that the malicious actors can go after. And because of that, there's more potential of a breach, because if companies aren't thinking about it, if hospitals aren't thinking about it, they're deploying these devices. So, your point, Tara, about monitoring, critically important. We actually have a security assessment that targets IoT and specifically IOMT, right? Medical things, looking at things like infusion pumps. Are there any issues associated with configuration, communication with those? Looking for things like CT scanners that are running, Windows 95 operating systems or other operating systems that can no longer be patched, that have been breached and are trying to exfiltrate data to a URL in China, right? Those types of things are super critical as well. But, there are products like Order and HIMSS, so the two that pop to mind, that are really good monitoring systems that you can deploy that do a complete asset inventory. So, you know all the information, all the assets that are in your environment, and have the ability to be able to monitor traffic, look for things, look for weaknesses, look for patches that have not been deployed, identify your devices that, are on the hit list that really need to be taken out of the environment, and so on. So it's really critical that you're paying attention to that monitoring piece. I agree 100% there.
Yeah, definitely keeps us up at night.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not going to be sleeping well again if I was before.
Right.
I'm certainly not, that's for sure. But that's the world we live in, alas. So I'd like to take us to our final round, round 3. And going first in round 3 is our panelist, Bob, who's got a question for Bachelor number 1, who is Steve from Connection. So Bob, all yours.
I was considering pulling out of this. Everybody's scaring me. But anyway, Steve, there's a lot of bad actors out there. And in my mind, are not that we'll say enterprises have got a handle completely on their, we'll say, their vulnerabilities and the risks that are associated with it. But I think a lot of organizations have probably adopted, I adopted the cybersecurity framework, but also an avid believer in defense in depth, without a shadow of a doubt. Education is great, but if you can get the technology to think before the user, I think that that's a winning solution. Now, my risks today, all right, and I'm not the only one, and possibly people aren't thinking about this yet, are 2 subsets of people. One is the patient who is using IoT devices that we've already talked about. And a lot of the patient care now is going to be done remotely, or at least it's the preferred method, probably lower costs and a whole bunch of things, and positive outcomes. Great terminology, positive outcomes. But there's still a risk to me. That's number 1. And an even greater risk at this point that has existed and is growing like coyotes in a, well, never mind. Our vendors and the engaging vendors, whether it's cloud vendor types or anybody who will access sensitive information from my organization outside my door. And remember, I can't control what they do. All I have is a piece of paper that says HIPAA. They signed it, BAA, yada, yada, yada. Now, given all of this stuff, all right, in terms of what I just said, the future right now, which in 2019 to 2020 and moving forward, artificial intelligence is in the hands of the bad actors. Okay, put it this way. What used to take 200 to maybe 260 days to get inside of me, or my vendors, or the patient's home, is probably going to be down to 30 days or less. The technology will do the work. The growing 5G IoT devices will have far more vulnerabilities. We've already mentioned that, all right? And we'll throw in that the attackers now are going to get a handle on capturing data in transit. It's like the Wild West now that's going to be released on the world, and we need to talk about this stuff. And last of all, again, the growing exploiting of supply chain. Given all of this stuff, what would be your, I'll call it the magic pill. People call it the silver bullet, but I call it the magic pill because we're into pill these days. How would you put your arms around this and help organizations? myself or anybody else that's out on the webinar today.
Yeah, very, very comprehensive, set of issues that you've talked about here. And it really encompasses how hard it is to be a chief information security officer in today's world, right? The hackers are always 10 steps ahead of us. And they're the best trained, best funded, have the most time to be able to do whatever they want to do. So I would start first, and this is one of my passionate areas when I'm talking to our customers, is the understanding of what threat is out there. And I can't tell you the number of times I talk to somebody that really doesn't understand a threat and what the threat is to them. So you identified a lot of different areas that are essentially attack vectors, right? The human is definitely the one area that is the most critical. And you think about the daunting task. If you've got, 2,000 employees, right, and you're trying to train them on how to deal with social engineering attacks, and you've got the most sophisticated people in the world out there that are trying to breach your environment through the human, think about how hard it is for you to get it right. The hacker has to get it right how many times? Once, right? Your humans need to get it right every single time. So it's a daunting task, but that means that the investment in security awareness and training needs to be one of your top priorities. And not only that, building a mechanism for when somebody sees something, right? In the airport, see something, say something. If they see something, there is a strategy for how they're going to respond. And we would help you build that overall framework, right? So it's not just a matter of having a cybersecurity framework, right? We talked earlier today about people, process, and technology, all really critical. But one of our key focus areas is to do a complete and comprehensive review of your overall environment, looking at 3 categories, right? We focus on protection, detection, and reaction. And there needs to be a lot of emphasis on the detection and the reaction piece, right? Because, I say this all the time, people think I'm crazy, right? It's not a matter of if, it's not even a matter of when. You likely have already been compromised and you just don't know it. You mentioned, Bob, the stats. I think it's 193 is the current stat days that malware sits in your environment undetected, and somewhere close to 70 days before you can actually get control and get it out of your environment. Hackers are in the environment for long periods of time, right? It's not shock and awe. They're coming in and they're sitting there for years, right? Listening and learning. You may not even be the target. They may just be using you to leverage you to attack something else. So all these things need to be taken into consideration. And the layered approach that you mentioned needs to be not only just technology, it needs to be your policy and process and a complete review of all of that. Are you doing the right things? Are you addressing the right areas? And also your people. Are they trained and are they effectively doing the things that they need to do? We do very comprehensive social engineering testing, phishing, vishing, and physical as well to help you determine where your weaknesses may be. But all of these are critical components that you need to make sure you're paying attention to as you're building your strategy. But step one is understanding threat and making sure your employees know what their role and responsibility is and helping to protect your organization against that particular threat. And the last point I'll make, and this is another area that I see mistakes are made, is total visibility and transparency about risk, especially to senior leadership, right? Because these are the people that are funding the programs that you're doing a comprehensive risk assessment, right? So having somebody like us come in and do outside ethical hacking, inside ethical hacking, social engineering testing, reviewing your policy, trying to penetrate your wireless, looking at your Active Directory and Exchange or Azure and O365 environment, doing all of that testing, identifying risk, documenting it, prioritizing it, and presenting a risk strategy. All those things are really important. And when that's done, socializing that with senior leadership is a critical component so that they know exactly what you're faced with and what you need to do to help, bring risk to an acceptable level, which is really what, a CISO's job is all about, right?
Thank you, Steve.
I'd like to give, we're watching the clock, but I'd like to give 30 seconds to both Bachelor number 2, Vikas from Enterprise, and Bachelor number 3, Matthew from Mimecast, just to a quickie on that, and then we'll go to our final question.
And Bob, it just, I know I mentioned it before, but I think based on everything you just outlined and identified what you're looking to do, I would strongly recommend looking at NIST RMF 2.0, because what that is a combination of the CSF, the NIST CSF for cybersecurity, privacy, and supply chain risks, because you were kind of hitting on all those 3 themes, I think, as you were talking through your list. So it's not only third parties, but fourth parties and fifth parties, even the IoT discussion, the privacy component of it. We need to understand where this data is moving and who's touching it and who's handling it. So at the federal level, they've been thinking about this for a few years, and then they released 2.0, which again, like I said, it's the CSF, privacy, and supply chain together, which is what really creates, I think, a unique opportunity to look at this holistically.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Matthew.
and I talked a little bit about the have and the have-nots. I mean, the haves are people that use cybersecurity framework and that have risk registers, and you can be maybe more advanced, more mature. I deal a lot with the have-nots on the security side, and so in addition to social engineering, vulnerability patching is terrible, basically. I mean, the top 20 exploits are always patched. It's just they're not patched, if you know what I mean. They're available patches, but not applied. So vulnerabilities. And then the third area I would focus on giving people advice is, how about fixing where you were breached or you had an incident? It's amazing how many people are breached and have an incident and then they don't fix it. Obviously it's complicated. The security guy wants to fix it. But if you could deal with your social engineering, the channels that occurs in your people, you're more aggressively fixing your patching your systems and dealing with fixing the root cause of incidents and breaches, it's 80%. You'd get 80% of the way there.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And the last section of round 3, we turn it over to Hussein, who's got a question about for number 2, who is Vikas from Enterprise Health.
So hi, Vikas, how are you?
I'm good. I'm scared of this question.
No, you shouldn't be. So I'm going to turn the conversation to governance and strategy, knowing that you've been in this space for quite some time and we've worked together in the past and sort of understand. So I understand, continuous vulnerability management, pen testing, remediation, phishing exercises, all that goes on, but how do you put it all together and present it to the board to convince them that the program is moving in the right direction, or areas of the program are stunted and need more infusion of resources, cash, or executive support, or it's just status quo because it's simply where it's ever going to get to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Was there another part to that, or is that the question?
I think we're running out of time. I had a little long drawn conversation, but I think I stopped here.
I'll be quick because let the others comment as well. But I think as I think about the whole, and I personally think about this topic a lot, as you probably know. But presenting to boards, getting budgetary approval, presenting to executive teams, getting stakeholder buy-in, I think those are all really, really important. And I think a measure of it, how you attack and approach it, I think is obviously a deeper conversation. But a measure of it is, do we have informed decision-making in our organization? Meaning, when we bring all these things together to then present that package, create that budget, can we do it in a way where we're saying, hey, we really have all the right inputs, we really have the right charter, we really have all of the stakeholder alignment that we need, and obviously there's the technology aspects of it as well, but do we have all the different pillars? And I think there are about 5 pillars that I can think of that lead to informed decision making, because if we don't have that from a governance standpoint, that's probably where our first gap is that we really need to address, and kind of go back to governance and work on governance and governance model a little bit further to then again, so the output is we've got really strong, good informed decision making, so that information that you send to the board is trusted because they know that you have a strong governance structure and are able to provide them a comprehensive, holistic view and recommendations. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, the common thread, I think, in many of the things that you're saying, which is so relevant, is holistic. You can't look at anything in isolation. There are so many moving parts, and they all have to be considered, as you said, holistically, which I think is real important. Steve or Matthew, any quick follow-ups on that before we break to let the panelists settle?
I can just a couple of things I've seen is a slight trend, I guess you will, like, you know, how the board will have an audit committee and they meet with the auditor without management involved. You're starting to see a little bit of that with essentially the CISO or acting as in the form of the independent auditor, or maybe they're bringing in a security independent body, but dealing with the board without the rest of the management there and talking about IT risk. So if that became a trend, I think that would really be a great thing, because it would be treated like a risk, like financial risks are treated.
Fantastic. Steve, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple of points, right? One, there are really sort of three things that are important for a CISO to be able to bring to the table. And as I mentioned in the last question, full transparency is really, really important with understanding, documenting, prioritizing, having a risk register, right? Be able to represent that. The other is to be able to demonstrate success, right? That's what the board's looking for. I'm giving you money, you're spending money on these things. What is it really doing to enhance my overall risk management program? Am I getting better at preventing breaches or whatever the case may be? Certainly, event management is a key area. And the third thing is CISO needs to bring value back to the company. It's not just all about cybersecurity, it's about operational cost as well. So is the CISO making good decisions with technology and process and capability that actually is bringing some level of value back into the company? Like, you know, that the IT team can use some form of asset management or event level management for other components of the business than just the cybersecurity response process.
Thank you. Wow, that was a lot of information we've consumed, and very fascinating, and more than a little bit scary, I suppose. But it's good that we're having the opportunity to sort of put this on the table and have this dialogue. So we are at the point now where we're going to have our panelists sort of step back right now and absorb what they've been listening to, and figure out which each panelist will select who they would like to quote unquote date. It's weird to say that.
Shouldn't you play the music then? Is that what happened?
I could do that again, okay, but I'll spare you. And while they're doing that, we'll come back to them in about 10 minutes. We have some questions from the audience that I'd like to be able to put out to you. And providers, you actually have one of these questions too. So I'll be asked that one first if I can. For the providers on the panel, did you end up sending home remote workers with both company-issued laptops and hotspot and Wi-Fi as well? We have some who even requested having the ability to print at home, but we managed to push back on that. How did you guys handle that?
I can throw in what we did. We were very digitally transformed before with a pretty remote workforce. So pretty much everybody had a laptop. It was very locked down, no USB access, no admin access, of my machine. And then our identity management, single sign-on, access control, obviously email security, web security that we provide ourselves, were all provided as a service. So it was essentially a non-event from a security and IT point of view. I mean, at least from a end user's perspective. I'm sure our IT guys were running around a little bit in the background, but it turned into more of an HR, business management, employee sanity. How do you keep everybody on the same page when it's all Zoom based and you're not just bumping into people in the kitchen? That became more of the issue, and I don't think we've solved it, but we've made we make a lot of efforts to keep people engaged and have cross-functional team meetings and have fun Fridays and stuff that tries to minimize the grind.
Okay, thank you, Steve or Vikas.
That was
yeah. So Yeah. So for us, it's similar to the answer Matthew just had, right? We had probably a third of the workforce in general that was already remote. So all the capabilities necessary for securing the remote work are in place. A couple of challenges, right, for those that were, fixed brick and mortar employees, right, getting them laptops or portable devices to be able to do their job. That was, something that needed to be done. But over and above that, really the biggest challenge was in the area of teleconferencing and audio, voice, right? So having the bandwidth necessary to be able to have now thousands of workers who are using WebEx and Teams and so on, as well as IP phones, and all that was a little bit of a challenge in tuning the bandwidth. But the model we had was really well structured, so it was just a matter of dealing with a few of those technical challenges.
And Vikas from Enterprise Health.
Yeah, so very similar. I mean, it was a non-event for us. I mean, we're a very remote workforce anyway. Rich, I think the question from Carol was to the providers.
But they're contemplating their date. So let's.
Gotcha.
Let me give you guys a chance to respond, and then we'll shoot back to the providers. And just also, we have 2 more questions after this, so we'll want to go pretty quick on those so we can announce who the winners are.
Yeah. Yeah, again, non-event for us. We're used to working remotely, as a typical, as a tech company and so forth, and security and all those types of things. We are not the shoemaker son. We actually, eat our own dog food, if you will, from a security standpoint. So non-event for us.
Excellent, thank you. Providers, can I take you away from your deep thoughts and just maybe give a quick response as to how you handled the need to transition quickly to remote work? How did that all go?
Sure, I'll go first. We had a lot of bandwidth issues at first, so we had to open that up. We did send some workers home with laptops, and we had secure coming in through VPN, VDI, so that's how we handled it.
Great, okay. Cool, thank you. Hussein or Bob?
Yeah, for us, we make a distinction between, we'll say, management laptops and we'll say typical user using their own devices. And we'll say all organizational equipment is locked down, like lockdown. I'm not going to go any further. And we'll say a typical worker will come in through Citrix. And it's a Citrix session. So everything that they see and do can only be done on site within our network, and nothing can go down the pipe. So it's kind of like a virtual process. So we're pretty much, we'll say, secure in that aspect. Not that you're 100% secure in everything that you do, but right now everything is working, and we're coming back around to looking at potential security gaps or potential threats that could be hitting them. My biggest worry today is that my heart goes out to any employee that is using their own technology, and I'm looking for ways for vendors out there that have great AV software that they can get a really good deal, and we know that software knocks out practically anything. I'll just mention Malwarebytes Premium just for giggles, because I think it's an inexpensive approach for them to be safe at home, along with the training.
Okay, thank you, sir. Hussein?
The same types of access management for remote users, VDI, Citrix, and VPN to the company issued laptops. I would say that, implementing MFA, a strong MFA, is critical to securing remote access. Passwords are not secure anymore. It's probably the biggest fallacy in information security is saying that my information is password protected.
Right.
It's probably, it takes about 30 seconds to crack a 8-character password And password spraying and other mechanisms are routinely used, and you can see them on the dark web for sale often enough, or being bartered, right? Or give me 10 user IDs and passwords for a credit card number, or whatever. The currency is in the dark web, and and from a DLP perspective, ensuring copy, paste, printing, and other features are disabled for the remote users, because you don't know where, in a quest to do their work, they may be copying, pasting, and such.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to barrel through. There are 3 more questions. I'm going to try to barrel through them and ask you to barrel through them, but be as thorough in your response as you barrel. That's kind of contradictory, but we'll give it a shot. We have a question that speaks to some of the challenges that we have, where biomed is on one side of the fence and IT is on the other side of the fence in terms of maintaining security and processes associated with security. How do you find that that works? How do you see that dynamic working well?
I have a sign in my
That's called relationship building.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very
That's
difficult.
where-
I totally agree. It's relationship management is what it is. Really working with those biomed folks, and
So
just
that's-
we put everything in a
Exactly.
DMZ as well. All biomed goes into its own DMZ, and then we kind of mitigate it that way.
Okay, terrific.
I think that's where your executive support comes in, right? That's where they have to communicate to the leaders in every organization that security isn't security's problem, right? It's an institutional issue. It's a board reported matter, naturally. So every division head has to do their part to ensure cybersecurity, regulatory compliance, and et cetera, and et cetera.
For sure.
And yeah, sometimes, we run into the challenges with biomedical equipment, but they do not have control over how to reconfigure some expensive, mission critical devices. So segmentation and other solutions are needed to secure them, because you do not want to interfere with medical procedures or treatment plans, right? So there is a fine balance that needs to be attained somehow. But for an ultrasound machine or an EKG machine, there shouldn't really be a battle of where it needs to go.
I got a yes/no question coming up. Do you allow remote workers to print? I throw that open to anybody.
Yeah, we don't allow it.
No, it's strictly by exception, depending on, where it is, but everyone else is generally not printing.
Same here.
Okay, thank you. And the last question that I see, again, we're going to try to do this quickly, though you could probably build an entire session around this, is what are you doing in your organizations to build programs and address insider threats?
It's a topic of its own, right? Insider threat, user behavior analytics, DLP, and keep layering technologies and processes on it. Find me an organization that successfully implemented it, other than FinTech, that uses a total of 5 applications and email that's blocked from every user. Other than that, yes, it's a struggle. It's to start small and grow it out to where it needs to be. Email being the number 1 threat vector, secure that. Any other ways of copying, moving data, such as USB drives, online storage, they all typically fall into insider threat-ish type of, vectors of data exfiltration. So lock them down and only allow them by exception. And then when you get down, fixing these bigger issues is then when you come down to an area where you can actually start isolating real threats that could potentially be considered insider threat, either in the revenue management, financials area, or in the clinical research area, or be it in patient registration or wherever else it may be.
Thank you very much. That was super helpful. And now, everybody, it is time for our panelists to pick their bachelors. And I would like to start with bachelor number one, who, a panelist number one, I'm sorry. Tara, that would be you.
All right.
And just to give a little, to tell us what you think in terms of what you heard today.
Well, I tell you what I think is, I wonder why I'm in this business. Geez, it's scary stuff. So I would actually like to date everyone, because, you know, it's a collaborative effort. But if I have to pick one, I'm going to go with Vikas, because he kept coming back to it's that holistic view. And, you know, that really resonates with me. And I think there's a lot of good products and insights that Enterprise Health has.
Well, fantastic. Thank you. And Hussein, I'd like to turn to you to see which bachelor you're going to pick.
I wish you had called on me first. So, you know, the RMF 2.0 and the holistic approach and the strategically managing security is something that I, you know, been thinking about. So I was gonna myself look at VCAS for what the date. It's gonna cost you money, VCAS.
We haven't used our credit cards a lot lately, so there's a lot of, you know, room open.
And last but definitely not least, Bob.
Thank you,
Who's your bachelor?
So who do you think I'm going to go for?
I wouldn't deign to guess. Are we looking at a consensus, or
Yeah, my vote's on Steve. He had a lot of good responses, and I'm in the business right now of having, you know, people, processes, and technology looked at, and I feel confident that in his responses and picking out the components that I want to hear, they have operational experience like I have, and truly their eyes and ears and their knowledge will certainly help me take a quantum leap to where I need to be. So I go with Steve.
very good. So
Do I get the take-home game? At least as the consolation.
And the consolation prize goes to, but I have to tell you, all of you guys were fabulous. I mean, you really just covered a lot of ground, and I think everyone who's been listening in on this today and is seeing this has learned an awful lot. And I can tell you, just from my own experience as a CIO and as a HIPAA security officer, I would be honored to be able to you know, work with you guys and know that I'm getting quality service. So that's been great. I just, like I said, really want to thank you. And I guess we are at the point where we're going to be closing up this session. But before we close, I want to just make a few quick announcements if I can. Please visit our virtual exhibit hall. Yes, that's a thing, a virtual exhibit hall to review the products and services that our chapter sponsors have to offer and enter to win a variety of prizes. Check the chat box for the link or find it on the event at dvnjhimsevent.com. And you had heard earlier that there is a winner for this session. And that winner is, drum roll please, Tim Reed from St. Joseph's Health. So congratulations, Tim. That's awesome. We hope that you'll join us for our second keynote presentation, Diversity in Healthcare IT, presented by Cletus Earle. That session begins at 4:00 p.m. So again, I just want to thank our panelists, thank everybody for your time today. I know we live in very interesting times, but we shouldn't deprive ourselves of the opportunity of having effective knowledge exchange. And hey, we've been very resourceful in finding a way to do it securely. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great conference and stay with us. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Peace out.
Thanks.